The federal courtroom fell completely silent as Judge Reggie Walton's gavel gently tapped, bringing the proceedings to a close. What should have been a routine judicial meeting on local policing initiatives had just changed into an extraordinary moment of recognition. "Before we adjourn," Judge Walton said, his deep voice carrying through the hushed chamber, "I wish to recognize something notable that occurred during today's proceedings." The seasoned federal judge, known for his measured words and judicial restraint, looked directly at Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, who sat with quiet dignity at the council table. "Congresswoman Crockett," he continued, "in my 30 years on the federal bench, I have rarely witnessed a supporter who brings such a powerful combination of legal brilliance and genuine grace to these proceedings. Your address today on local-centered fairness reminds us all why civil discourse matters." Reporters exchanged glances. The gallery leaned forward. Judge Walton, appointed by President George W. Bush and respected across party lines, had just publicly praised a Democratic Congresswoman in a way that transcended politics entirely. But it was Crockett's humble response that would transform this moment from merely unusual to genuinely historic. A response that would inspire a national exchange about dignity in public service and bring together voices from across the political spectrum. Before we reveal what happened next in this notable exchange, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We bring you stories of bridge building and excellence that remind us what's possible when public servants lead with character and vision. The E. Barrett Prettyman Federal Courthouse in Washington, D.C. had witnessed countless historic proceedings. But this particular spring morning carried a different kind of energy. The Justice Department had convened a special judicial meeting on reimagining local policing for the 21st century, bringing together federal judges, law enforcement officials, local leaders, and legislators. At the center of this gathering was a panel dialogue on rebuilding trust between law enforcement and historically marginalized communities. With rising tensions nationwide after several high-profile incidents, finding common ground seemed increasingly difficult. The meeting's unique format allowed for substantive dialogue rather than political posturing. Each panelist would present research-based proposals, followed by questions from the judicial panel led by Judge Reggie Walton. Judge Walton brought unique viewpoint to these dialogues. Appointed to the federal bench by President George W. Bush in 2001, the former prosecutor had earned widespread respect for his independence and dedication to equal fairness. Having grown up in a working-class neighborhood in Pennsylvania, Walton understood firsthand the importance of both effective law enforcement and local trust. "We're not here to score political points," he reminded attendees in his opening remarks. "We're here to find answers that work for all Americans, regardless of zip code or demographic." Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett represented a new generation of leadership. Before entering Congress, she had built a distinguished career as a civil rights attorney in Texas, winning landmark cases that improved police accountability while also advocating for officer safety and support. Her method consistently sought to transcend false choices between public safety and civil rights. What do you think about the importance of civil discourse in addressing our most challenging national issues? Has mutual respect in public service been declining? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We're genuinely interested in your viewpoint on how we can rebuild trust across divides. What made Crockett unique was her notable ability to bridge divides. Despite representing a predominantly Democratic district, she had earned the respect of law enforcement organizations for her balanced method. She supported for accountability, while acknowledging the challenges officers face daily. She pushed for reform while rejecting simplistic narratives that demonized entire professions. Her preparation for this meeting reflected her thoroughness. Rather than relying solely on academic research, she had spent months conducting listening sessions with local members, police officers, judges, and families affected by crime. She brought their collective wisdom to the table, not just statistics and theory. The panel included diverse viewpoints. James Montgomery, president of the National Police Chiefs Association, Dr. Ela Chen, a criminologist specializing in local-based answers, and Robert Williams, a local organizer who had successfully implemented neighborhood safety initiatives in Chicago. While the attendees shared a dedication to improvement, tensions emerged during the dialogue. Montgomery emphasized the challenges officers face in high-crime areas and the need for local cooperation. Williams countered with examples of local initiatives that succeeded despite initial resistance from local departments. Dr. Chen presented research showing that collaborative methods produced better outcomes than adversarial ones. As the exchanges grew increasingly pointed, attendees braced for the kind of partisan conflict that typically derails such dialogues. Instead, Congresswoman Crockett's address would offer a refreshing alternative that neither compromised values nor sacrificed civility. When Congresswoman Crockett's turn came to address the meeting, she methoded the podium with a quiet confidence. Rather than beginning with prepared remarks, she set aside her notes and spoke directly to the diverse audience. Before sharing my proposal, she began, "I want to recognize something essential. Everyone in this room, whether you wear a badge, a robe, or simply the mantle of concerned citizen, shares a fundamental dedication to fairness and safety. We may differ on methods, but our desired destination is notably similar." The simple recognizement of shared values immediately shifted the atmosphere. Several attendees nodded in agreement, including some who had seemed skeptical moments earlier. In preparing for today, she continued, "I spoke with Officer Michael Ramirez, who patrols one of the highest crime neighborhoods in my district. He told me something I'll never forget. Congresswoman, I don't need people to agree with everything I do. I just need them to understand that I'm trying my best in impossible situations." She then turned slightly toward the local supporters. "I also spoke with Ms. Denise Washington, whose son was wrongfully detained last year. She told me, I don't hate the police. I just want them to see my son the way I see him, as someone worthy of dignity and the benefit of the doubt." What followed was not the typical political speech, but a masterclass in principled bridge building. Crockett presented a vision for local policing that recognized legitimate concerns from all viewpoints, without sacrificing core values of fairness and equity. She outlined 5 specific proposals, each supported by both research and real-world examples of success. First, she supported for increased transparency in policing data, sharing how departments that voluntarily publish detailed information about stops, arrests, and use of force incidents actually saw improved local relations and officer morale. Sunshine isn't just a disinfectant, she noted. It's also a trust builder. When nothing is hidden, assumptions of bad faith diminish on all sides. Second, she recommended expanded crisis response teams that paired officers with mental health professionals, citing successful programs in both conservative and progressive jurisdictions. Third, she proposed local oversight boards with a crucial distinction. They would include both civilian members and current or former law enforcement representatives, ensuring balanced viewpoint. Fourth, she supported for increased investment in officer wellness programs, noting that departments with robust mental health support had fewer excessive force incidents. Finally, she recommended neighborhood-specific policing plans developed collaboratively by residents and law enforcement, tailored to each local's unique needs rather than one-size-fits-all methods. Throughout her address, Crockett recognized potential objections from various viewpoints, addressing them with respect rather than dismissal. When discussing local oversight, she spoke directly to police representatives. "I understand concerns that civilian review could become adversarial. That's precisely why I'm proposing a balanced method that includes law enforcement voices." When Judge Walton opened the floor for questions, the first came from Montgomery, the Police Chiefs Association president, who had seemed skeptical during earlier dialogues. "Congresswoman," he began, "your method seems balanced on paper, but how do we ensure these oversight boards don't become politically motivated witch hunts against officers making split-second decisions?" It was a challenging question that could have easily led to defensiveness. Instead, Crockett nodded thoughtfully. "That's a legitimate concern, Mr. Montgomery. Any oversight mechanism must distinguish between honest mistakes and actual misconduct. That's why I'm proposing these boards operate with clear guidelines about standard police procedures and the realities of rapid decision-making in potentially dangerous situations. Including former officers provides crucial viewpoint that purely civilian boards might lack." Her response earned a nod of appreciation from Montgomery. "I appreciate your recognition of the complexities officers face daily." Dr. Chan raised a question from another viewpoint. "While your proposals sound reasonable, they still rely on institutions that some communities fundamentally distrust. How do we address that underlying skepticism?" Crockett recognized the validity of this concern as well. Trust can't be legislated or mandated. It must be earned through consistent actions over time. That's why these proposals include accountability metrics and regular local feedback sessions. We're not asking communities to trust based on promises but on verifiable results. Throughout the question and answer session, Crockett maintained this balanced method, firmly advocating values of equity and accountability while acknowledging legitimate concerns from all stakeholders. She never demonized any participant or viewpoint, instead seeking common ground without compromising core values. As the session continued, something notable happened. The tone of the entire meeting shifted. Other attendees began adopting similar language of mutual respect and shared goals. Even those with opposing viewpoints found ways to recognize valid points from others while clarifying their own positions. What had begun as a potentially contentious dialogue was transforming into a model of productive dialogue, not because attendees abandoned their values, but because they found ways to express them with both clarity and respect. As the meeting prepared to adjourn for lunch, Judge Walton made an unexpected intervention. Rather than simply announcing the break, he removed his glasses and addressed the gathering. "Before we recess," he said, "I want to recognize something I've observed during this morning's session. We've witnessed a masterclass in how difficult exchanges can be conducted in a democracy." The room grew quiet as their respected judge continued. "As a federal judge, I'm limited in what policy positions I can endorse, but I can and should recognize excellence in advocacy when I see it, particularly when that advocacy elevates our collective dialogue rather than debasing it." He turned toward Congresswoman Crockett. "Congresswoman, your address showed something our public discourse desperately needs: the ability to support her principled positions without demonizing those who hold different views. You showed that one can be both passionate about fairness and respectful toward all attendees in that exchange." The courtroom remained silent as Judge Walton continued. "In my 30 years on the federal bench, I have rarely witnessed a supporter who brings such a powerful combination of legal brilliance and genuine grace to these proceedings. Your address today on local-centered fairness reminds us all why civil discourse matters." He added, "This isn't about politics or partisanship. It's about the fundamental skills and character required for productive democratic dialogue. We can disagree, sometimes vigorously, without attributing the worst motives to those with whom we disagree." The judge's comments, coming from a respected Bush appointee directed toward a Democratic congresswoman, carried special weight precisely because they transcended partisan lines. This wasn't political flattery but professional recognition of excellence. Crockett, momentarily surprised by this unexpected recognition, took a moment to gather her thoughts. When she responded, her words reflected the same thoughtfulness that had characterized her entire address. "Thank you, Your Honor," she began. "While I deeply appreciate your kind words, what matters most isn't my personal method, but our collective dedication to finding answers. The challenges we're discussing today affect real communities and real officers serving those communities. They deserve our best efforts to find common ground without compromising our values," she continued. "I learned long ago from a mentor that effective advocacy isn't measured by how good you make yourself look, but by how much progress you make toward fairness. Sometimes that progress requires building unlikely coalitions based on shared values, rather than identical viewpoints." She then did something unexpected. Turning toward Montgomery, the police association president with whom she had major policy disagreements, "I want to recognize Mr. Montgomery's willingness to engage in these difficult exchanges. We may disagree on specific methods, but I never doubt his dedication to both officer safety and local well-being." Montgomery, visibly moved by this unexpected recognition, nodded in appreciation. "Likewise, Congresswoman, we need more dialogue like this." As the meeting broke for lunch, attendees began interacting in ways that transcended the usual political and professional divisions. Police representatives engaged with local activists in substantive exchanges. Judges spoke with local members about their experiences. The artificial barriers that typically divide such dialogues had begun to dissolve. Dr. Chen, the criminologist, joined a table with both officers and local supporters. Their exchange, overheard by nearby attendees, focused not on accusations but on identifying specific neighborhoods where collaborative methods had shown promise. A Justice Department veteran with 30 years of experience remarked to a colleague, "I've attended dozens of these meetings, and they usually end with people more entrenched in their positions than when they arrived. Something different is happening here." During the lunch break, reporters sought out various attendees. Rather than collecting the usual oppositional sound bites, they encountered thoughtful reflections on finding common ground. When CNN methoded Montgomery about Judge Walton's remarks, he offered unexpected viewpoint. The judge recognized what many of us have seen today, that Congresswoman Crockett brings a unifying method without compromising her values. She supporters for accountability while still respecting the challenges officers face. That balance is refreshing. Williams, the local organizer who had earlier expressed skepticism about law enforcement engagement, told MSNBC, "What struck me about the Congresswoman's method was how she elevated local voices without creating unnecessary division. She showed that advocating for reform doesn't require demonizing those in uniform." As attendees returned for the afternoon session, something notable happened. The formal panel structure gave way to collaborative working groups focused on developing concrete action steps for each proposal. These groups intentionally mixed viewpoints, each including law enforcement, judicial representatives, local supporters, and policy experts. In one working group focused on crisis response teams, a police captain from Dallas shared how such programs had reduced both use of force incidents and officer injuries in his department. A local supporter from Baltimore described how similar initiatives had built trust in neighborhoods previously resistant to police engagement. Together, they began drafting guidelines that incorporated both viewpoints. Congresswoman Crockett moved between groups, not dominating exchanges but facilitating connections where communication stalled. When disagreements emerged, she helped attendees identify underlying shared values, even amid different policy preferences. In the Transparency Working Group, tension arose over how much officer information should be publicly available. Rather than pushing her own position, Crockett asked clarifying questions that helped both sides articulate their core concerns. Safety for officers and accountability for communities. This reframing led to a breakthrough, a tiered disclosure system that protected officer privacy while still ensuring meaningful oversight. By late afternoon, each working group had developed preliminary proposals that reflected multiple viewpoints. Unlike typical meeting outcomes, vague statements of principle or completely one-sided proposals, these proposals included specific implementation steps with broad stakeholder support. As the meeting concluded, Judge Walton invited each group to briefly present their work. The address revealed something extraordinary. Proposals that recognized legitimate concerns from all viewpoints while still advancing meaningful reform. The proposals weren't watered-down compromises but thoughtful synthesis that addressed core needs identified by diverse stakeholders. In his closing remarks, Judge Walton noted this achievement. "What we've witnessed today goes beyond civility for its own sake. We've seen how respectful engagement leads to substantive outcomes that might actually work in the real world because they incorporate wisdom from multiple viewpoints rather than advancing a single viewpoint while ignoring legitimate concerns from others." Headed, "If there's a lesson here, it's that democracy functions best when we engage differences with both conviction and courtesy. I hope today's example inspires similar efforts across our divided public square." As attendees prepared to depart, something unexpected happened. Montgomery methoded Crockett with an invitation. "Congresswoman, our annual law enforcement leadership meeting is next month in Dallas. We'd be honored if you would consider delivering the keynote address on building local police partnerships." This invitation from a police association to a reform-minded Congresswoman represented a breakthrough that would have seemed impossible just hours earlier. It signaled recognition that her method offered a pathway forward that respected both accountability and the challenges officers face daily. Crockett accepted with characteristic thoughtfulness. "I'd be honored, Mr. Montgomery, and I hope you'll consider joining me for a local forum in my district next month. Our residents would benefit from hearing directly from law enforcement leadership about the challenges you face." This exchange, witnessed by nearby attendees, captured the day's transformation. What had begun as potentially adversarial positions had evolved into genuine partnership without either side abandoning core values. As attendees departed, they carried with them not just policy proposals, but a model of engagement that would influence their work moving forward. The meeting had showed that principled bridge building could produce not just good feelings, but substantive results. A lesson with implications far beyond policing issues. The impact of Judge Walton's recognition and Congresswoman Crockett's method extended far beyond the meeting itself. By that evening, news of their exchange had spread through traditional and social media, offering a refreshing contrast to the confrontational political content that typically dominates news cycles. CNN's coverage focused on the substance. Today's judicial meeting produced something increasingly rare in our political landscape: substantive policy proposals with support from stakeholders across the spectrum. At the center of this achievement was Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, whose method earned unusual public recognition from Judge Reggie Walton. Fox News surprised viewers with their coverage. In a refreshing departure from partisan politics, today's Justice Department meeting saw a Democratic Congresswoman and a Bush-appointed federal judge model, the kind of respectful engagement our democracy needs. Judge Walton's recognition of Congresswoman Crockett's method transcended typical political divisions. The Washington Post's headline captured the broader significance. A rare moment of democratic dialogue, Judge Walton highlights Congresswoman Crockett's bridge-building method. Within days, video clips of both Crockett's address and Judge Walton's recognition had gone viral, not for controversy, but for their hopeful contrast to typical political discourse. Law schools, public policy programs, and leadership me's requested full recordings to use in their curricula. The substantive impact was equally major. The meeting's working groups formalized their proposals into a comprehensive report titled Building Local Safety Through Collaborative Methods. Unlike typical government reports that gather dust, this document quickly gained traction across jurisdictions. Within a month, pilot programs based on the meeting proposals launched in 12 cities. These initiatives shared a common feature. They were developed through inclusive processes that brought together law enforcement, local leaders, and policy experts from the beginning rather than imposing answers from a single viewpoint. In Dallas, a crisis response program pairing mental health professionals with specially trained officers showed promising early results, reducing both arrests and use of force incidents while connecting individuals with appropriate services. The program's design reflected input from both police representatives and local supporters, addressing concerns from multiple stakeholders. In Atlanta, a new transparency initiative made policing data accessible while protecting officer safety, a balanced method that earned support from both police unions and civil rights organizations. The implementation committee intentionally included representatives from both constituencies, ensuring the program addressed diverse concerns. Philadelphia implemented neighborhood-specific policing plans developed through collaborative local forums. These plans recognized that different neighborhoods face different challenges, requiring tailored methods rather than one-size-fits-all policies. The process brought together residents, business owners, local organizations, and local officers to develop strategies reflecting local needs and resources. 2 months after the meeting, Congresswoman Crockett fulfilled her promise to speak at the National Police Chiefs Association annual meeting. Her address, titled Partners in Safety, Building Bridges Between Police and Communities, received a standing ovation from law enforcement leaders who had previously been skeptical of reform-minded legislators. "We don't have to choose between supporting officers and ensuring accountability," she told the assembled chiefs. "The best policies do both, providing officers the resources, training, and support they need while ensuring transparency and local input. These aren't competing priorities but complementary necessities." Following her speech, Montgomery invited Crockett to join a newly formed advisory council, bringing together law enforcement leaders and reform supporters to develop best practices for 21st century policing. This unprecedented collaboration reflected the trust she had built through her balanced method. True to his word, Montgomery also participated in a local forum in Crockett's district, engaging directly with residents about their concerns and experiences. The event, which could have been tense, instead produced constructive dialogue that led to specific local initiatives improving police-local relations. Meanwhile, Judge Walton's recognition continued, generating dialogue within legal and judicial circles. The Federal Judicial Center, which provides training for federal judges, developed a new program on facilitating productive dialogue in divisive cases based on values showed at the meeting. In a rare interview with the American Bar Association Journal, Judge Walton expanded on his comments. "What impressed me about Congresswoman Crockett's advocacy wasn't just her legal reasoning, though that was excellent. It was her understanding that effectiveness comes from engaging multiple viewpoints, rather than dismissing those who disagree. She showed that one can be both principled and respectful, that courtesy and conviction are complementary, not contradictory." He added, "In today's polarized environment, there's a misconception that effective advocacy requires aggressive confrontation. Congresswoman Crockett showed that thoughtful engagement often proves more powerful in achieving substantive outcomes. I hope her example influences how we train the next generation of supporters." The legal profession took notice. Bar associations nationwide developed continuing education programs on effective advocacy in polarized contexts, featuring the exchange between Walton and Crockett as a central case study. Law schools incorporated recordings into their professional responsibility and advocacy courses. 6 months after the meeting, measurable results began emerging from the pilot programs. Cities implementing the collaborative proposals saw improvements in both crime metrics and local satisfaction. Measures. Departments adopting transparency initiatives experienced increased local cooperation in solving crimes. Crisis response teams reduced both arrests and emergency room visits. For mental health crisis, these concrete outcomes attracted bipartisan attention in Congress. Representatives from both parties, impressed by the practical success of these balanced methods, formed a working group to develop federal legislation supporting similar initiatives nationwide. When introducing the resulting bill, the Republican co-sponsor explicitly referenced the Walton-Crockett model of respectful engagement leading to effective policy. This legislation reflects input from law enforcement, local organizations, mental health experts, and civil rights supporters. Like the process that inspired it, it respects multiple viewpoints while advancing our shared goal of safer communities. The Safer Communities Through Collaborative Policing Act passed with strong bipartisan support, a rarity in contemporary legislation addressing policing issues. The bill provided funding for crisis response teams, transparency initiatives, officer wellness programs, and local-led safety planning while establishing performance metrics, ensuring accountability for results. At the bill signing ceremony, Congresswoman Crockett shared the stage with Montgomery, symbolizing the unlikely alliance that had developed from their initial engagement at the meeting. Their joint presence showed how principled bridge building could produce not just good feelings but substantive policy outcomes. For Congresswoman Crockett personally, the impact extended beyond specific legislation. Previously known primarily within legal circles, she emerged as a national voice for principled collaboration. Universities and organizations across the political spectrum invited her to speak about effective advocacy in polarized contexts. The Washington Post published a profile titled Bridge Builder: How Jasmine Crockett is Changing the Politics of Fairness Reform. The article detailed how her method, prioritizing results over rhetorical victories, was influencing a new generation of public servants. The old model of advocacy assumed that the loudest voice wins, Crockett explained in the profile. But volume doesn't equal impact. Real change happens when you build coalitions around shared values, even amid policy disagreements. That doesn't mean compromising values. It means communicating them in ways that invite partnership, rather than provoking resistance. When asked by a law student whether such a method was sustainable in today's political environment, Crockett offered a thoughtful response that reflected her pragmatic idealism. Of course, it's challenging, she recognized. Our media ecosystem and political incentives often reward those who demonize opponents rather than engage them. But I found that most Americans, regardless of political affiliation, are exhausted by endless conflict and hungry for methods that actually solve problems. She continued, "This isn't about finding some mushy middle ground or abandoning core values. It's about recognizing that even those with whom we disagree often have legitimate concerns that must be addressed if we want sustainable answers, rather than temporary victories that get reversed." With the next election cycle, this viewpoint resonated across traditional political divides. Conservative thought leaders who disagreed with Crockett on policy nevertheless praised her method. National Review published an essay titled "Disagreeing Without Demonizing," citing her as an example even conservatives could learn from. While we maintain major policy differences with Congresswoman Crockett, her method of advocacy, principled but respectful, offers a model for effective conservative engagement as well. Progressive supporters similarly recognize the strategic wisdom in her method. The American Prospect noted, Crockett shows that seeking common ground doesn't mean abandoning progressive values. Rather, it's about advancing those values through coalition building that makes meaningful change possible and sustainable. The Crockett effect, as political analysts began calling it, represented something major in American political culture: the recognition that effectiveness often requires building bridges rather than burning them. Young public servants across the political spectrum, noting how this method produced concrete results, began emulating her model of principled engagement. 2 years after the meeting, Crockett published a book titled Common Ground: advocacy that builds bridges without compromising values. The book became required reading in public policy programs, leadership training, and advocacy organizations across the political spectrum. In the book's introduction, she wrote, "The challenges facing our communities from public safety to economic opportunity to environmental protection are too complex and interconnected to be solved through division. Effective advocacy requires the ability to advance clear values while building coalitions based on shared values, even amid policy disagreements." The original exchange between Judge Walton and Congresswoman Crockett, a moment of recognition that transcended partisan lines, continues to serve as a touchstone for those seeking more productive methods to difficult exchanges. It reminds us that how we engage differences matters as much as the positions we support or that the means we employ shape the ends we achieve. The programs launched following the meeting have now expanded to dozens of cities with documented improvements in both public safety metrics and local trust. The collaborative model has spread beyond policing to address other challenging issues from housing policy to environmental fairness, demonstrating that inclusive processes often produce more effective and sustainable outcomes than methods dominated by a single viewpoint. Perhaps most majorly, the method modeled by Crockett and recognized by Judge Walton has influenced public expectations. Increasingly, voters across the political spectrum express preference for candidates who show the ability to work across differences without compromising core values, recognizing that such a method delivers better results than perpetual conflict. As one local leader who participated in the original meeting reflected 3 years later, what Judge Walton recognized in Congresswoman Crockett wasn't just personal grace, but practical wisdom. She understood that lasting progress requires building coalitions rather than just energizing existing supporters. The results speak for themselves, real changes that have improved both officer well-being and local safety, because they addressed legitimate concerns from all stakeholders. In his final public statement on the matter, Judge Walton captured the enduring significance of that notable meeting. What Congresswoman Crockett showed transcends any single issue or policy debate. She reminded us that democracy depends not just on passionate advocacy, but on the ability to engage differences with both conviction and respect. In recognizing the humanity of those with whom we disagree, we don't weaken our position. We strengthen our democracy. If this story of bridge building and principled leadership inspired you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We bring you stories of individuals who show that character and effectiveness go hand in public service. Share this video with someone who could use a reminder that in our most divided moments, how we engage differences defines not just our impact, but our democracy itself. The work of building a more perfect union continues.